The dust was still settling from the morning's gunfight when Cole Anders saw three men in black suits step down from the afternoon stage, carrying leather satchels that marked them as bankers or lawyers, and his gut told him they meant trouble for someone in Del Rio, Texas. It was late August of 1882, and the heat shimmered off the dirt streets like waves on an ocean. Cole had been mending fence posts at the edge of town when he noticed the strangers, their city clothes already wilting in the unforgiving sun. Something about the way they moved with purpose toward the land office made him pause, hammer in hand, watching. Del Rio was a border town where the Rio Grande separated Texas from Mexico, a place where fortunes were made and lost on cattle, land, and the sweat of honest work. Cole had drifted into town 6 months ago, hiring on with various ranches, doing odd jobs, keeping to himself mostly. He was 25 years old, tall and lean from hard work, with dark hair that curled at his collar and eyes the color of creek water after a storm. He finished securing the post and wiped the sweat from his brow with his bandana before heading toward the saloon. That was where news traveled fastest in Del Rio, and if those city men were up to something, someone would know about it soon enough. The Lucky Star Saloon was quieter than usual for a Wednesday afternoon. A few ranch hands nursed beers at the bar, and old Pete was dealing cards to himself in the corner, practicing his shuffle. Cole ordered a whiskey, and had just taken his first sip when he heard the raised voices coming from down the street. "This is my home! You cannot just take it from me!" The voice was female, strong despite the tremor of fear running through it. Cole set down his glass and moved to the swinging doors, peering out. A small crowd had gathered outside a modest adobe house 3 buildings down. The 3 men in suits stood on the porch, and facing them was a young woman with auburn hair pulled back in a practical braid, her calico dress dusty at the hem. Her hands were clenched into fists at her sides, and even from a distance Cole could see the determination in her posture. "Miss Shepherd, we understand your distress, but the law is clear," one of the suited men was saying, his voice carrying that particular tone of false sympathy that made Cole's jaw tighten. "Your father's debts are substantial, and the bank has been more than patient. The property must be seized to satisfy the outstanding loans." "My father has been dead for 3 months, the woman said, her voice rising. "I have been making payments every month since he passed. I showed you the receipts. Receipts for a fraction of what is owed." Another suit replied, pulling papers from his satchel. "The full amount was due upon your father's death, as stipulated in the loan agreement. You have had 90 days to settle the debt. That time has expired." Cole found himself walking toward the gathering before he had consciously decided to move. Something about the way those men surrounded her, the way they towered over her on what was clearly her own porch, stirred something protective and angry in his chest. He had seen too many powerful men take advantage of those with less, had lost his own family's farm in Missouri to similar circumstances when he was barely 18. He had sworn then that he would never stand by and watch it happen again if he could help it. "There a problem here?" Cole heard himself say as he reached the edge of the crowd. His voice was calm, conversational even, but there was steel underneath. The woman turned to look at him, and Cole felt something shift in his chest. She had green eyes, he noticed, the color of spring grass, and they were bright with unshed tears and fury. She was beautiful, but it was not a soft beauty. There was strength in the line of her jaw, determination in the set of her shoulders. She could not have been more than 22 or 23, but she stood like someone who had already weathered storms that would have broken others. "This is a private matter," the first suited man said, looking down his nose at Cole. "Move along, cowboy." "Did not sound private, seeing as how you were conducting your business in front of half the town," Cole replied, moving closer. He tipped his hat to the woman. "Madam, these men bothering you?" "They are trying to take my home," she said, and her voice broke just slightly on the last word before she steadied it. "They claim my father owed money, but I have been paying. I have done everything they asked." "Do you have a legal representative?" Cole asked her, then turned his gaze to the 3 men. "Because seems to me, a lady should have proper representation before you go throwing her out of her home." "The law does not require it," the second man said, his face reddening. "We have a court order, signed by Judge Morrison this morning. Everything is legal and proper." Cole took the porch steps slowly, deliberately, until he was standing between the men and the woman. He was not carrying his gun, having left it with his saddle at the boarding house, but he had learned long ago that sometimes presence mattered more than weapons. He was tall enough to look the men directly in the eye, and he let them see that he was not going anywhere. "Over my dead body you will," Cole said quietly, the words falling into the hot afternoon air like stones into still water. "You are not taking this lady's home. Not today." The tension stretched taut as a wire fence. The crowd had grown larger, and Cole could feel the townspeople watching, waiting to see what would happen. In Del Rio, property disputes were common enough, but there was an unwritten code about how such things were handled. You did not throw a woman out of her home without giving her a fair chance. "Young man, you are interfering with legal proceedings," the first suited man said, his voice taking on a threatening edge. "I could have the sheriff arrest you." "Then maybe you should go fetch Sheriff Donovan," Cole replied evenly. "I would be happy to discuss this with him. In fact, I think we all should. Because I am curious to know how Judge Morrison signed a court order this morning when he left on the stage for San Antonio yesterday afternoon and will not be back for a week." The third man, who had been silent until now, shifted uncomfortably and exchanged glances with his companions. Cole watched the silent communication pass between them and knew he had hit on something. His gamble about the judge had been just that, a guess based on seeing the judicial circuit rider's horse absent from the livery stable that morning, but their reaction told him he had guessed correctly. "The paperwork is all in order," the first man insisted, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "Then you would not mind if we all took a walk down to the land office and verified that together," Cole said. It was not a question. He turned slightly to look at the woman behind him. "Madam, do you have your father's original loan documents, the ones he would have received when he first borrowed the money?" She nodded quickly. "Yes, they are inside. My father kept all his important papers in a locked box." "Why do not you go get them?" Cole suggested gently. "Take your time. We will all wait right here." The woman hesitated, her eyes moving from Cole to the three men and back again. Cole could see her weighing her options, trying to decide if she could trust him. He was a stranger to her, after all, just some drifter who had inserted himself into her troubles. But something in her expression shifted, some decision made, and she nodded once before disappearing into the house. The silence that followed was uncomfortable. The suited men looked like they wanted to argue, but could not quite figure out how to proceed now that their bluff had been called. The crowd murmured among themselves, and Cole caught fragments of conversation. "That is Sarah Shepherd, Old Tom's daughter. Heard she has been running the ranch by herself since he passed. Doing a fair job of it, too, from what I hear. Those men are from the bank in Eagle Pass." So her name was Sarah. It suited her, Cole thought. Strong and simple, no pretense to it. The door opened again, and Sarah emerged carrying a metal lockbox. She set it on a small table on the porch and produced a key from her pocket, unlocking it with hands that shook only slightly. From inside, she pulled a sheaf of papers, some yellowed with age. "My father borrowed $2,000 4 years ago," Sarah said, her voice steadier now. "He used this property and 200 acres of grazing land as collateral. The terms were a 5-year loan at 6% interest, with payments of $40 per month. He never missed a payment. I have every receipt, marked paid and signed by the bank manager in Eagle Pass." She spread the papers on the table, and Cole leaned in to look at them. He was no lawyer, but he could read well enough, and what he saw made his blood boil. The original loan document was exactly as Sarah had described, but there was another paper underneath, dated just 2 months ago, with what looked like Tom Shepard's signature at the bottom. "What is this?" Cole asked, pointing to the second document. "An amendment to the original loan," the first suited man said quickly, reaching for the papers. Cole caught his wrist, not roughly, but firmly enough to stop the motion. "I was not asking you," Cole said. "I was asking Miss Shepherd." Sarah picked up the paper, her brow furrowing as she read. "I have never seen this before," she said slowly. "This says my father agreed to a balloon payment of the full remaining balance upon his death, with all assets to be seized if payment could not be made within 90 days. But this makes no sense. Why would he sign such a thing?" "Perhaps he was in more desperate straits than you knew," the second man suggested. "My father told me everything about the ranch finances," Sarah said, anger flashing in her eyes. "He was teaching me how to manage the books, how to negotiate with buyers, everything. He would never have signed something like this without telling me." Cole took the document from her hands and held it up to the light, examining it closely. He had seen his share of forged papers in his time, had even been accused of forgery himself once before his name was cleared. The signature looked right at first glance, but there was something off about the ink, the way it sat on the paper. "This document is dated June 15th, Cole said slowly. 2 weeks before Tom Shepard died. Can anyone verify where he was that day? Who he met with?" "He was here." A new voice spoke up from the crowd. Cole turned to see an older Mexican woman pushing her way forward. "I am Rosa Gutierrez. I live next door to the Shepards. Tom was helping my husband repair our well all that week. He did not go into Eagle Pass at all in June. He was waiting until the cattle sale in July to make the trip." "The woman is mistaken," the first suited man said, but he was sweating now, and not just from the heat. "Rosa is never mistaken about anything," another voice called out. There were murmurs of agreement from the crowd. Cole felt the momentum shifting. "I think we need to send a telegram to Eagle Pass," he said. "Get the bank manager out here to verify this document. In the meantime, Miss Shepard stays in her home." "You have no authority to make that determination," the third man finally spoke, his voice tight with frustration. "Maybe not," Cole agreed, "but I am making it anyway, and I am guessing most folks here in Del Rio would agree with me." He looked out at the crowd, seeing nods and hearing sounds of approval. "So, here is what is going to happen. You three are going to take your papers and go back to your hotel. Miss Shepard is going to stay right here in her home. Tomorrow morning, we are all going to meet at the land office with Sheriff Donovan, and we are going to get to the bottom of this. Sound fair?" It was not really a question, and everyone knew it. The three men looked at each other, clearly calculating their options. They were outnumbered and outmaneuvered, at least for the moment. The first man finally gathered up his papers and shoved them back into his satchel. "This is not over," he said to Sarah, his voice cold. "The law is on our side." "Then the law will still be on your side tomorrow," Cole replied calmly. "Good day, gentlemen." He stood on the porch, unmoving, until the three men had descended the steps and were walking back toward the center of town. Only when they were out of sight did Cole allow himself to relax slightly. The crowd began to disperse, though several people stopped to speak words of encouragement to Sarah, offering help if she needed it. Rosa came up onto the porch and took Sarah's hands in her own. "Mija, you should not be alone tonight. Come stay with Miguel and me." "Thank you, Rosa, but I will be fine," Sarah said, managing a weak smile. "I need to be here to think about what to do next." Rosa looked like she wanted to argue, but finally nodded. "I will bring you some dinner later. You need to eat." She turned to Cole, studying him with sharp, dark eyes. "And who are you, young man? I have seen you around town, but I do not know your name." "Cole Anders, madam," he said, tipping his hat. "Just someone who does not like seeing folks get pushed around." "Well, Cole Anders, Sarah is a good girl, and she has had a hard time since her father passed. You did a good thing today." Rosa patted his arm before heading back to her own property. When they were alone on the porch, Sarah turned to face Cole fully. Up close, he could see the exhaustion etched into her features, the fine lines of worry around her eyes. But he could also see the strength there, the refusal to be broken. "Why did you help me?" she asked quietly. "You do not even know me." Cole thought about how to answer that. He could tell her about his own family's loss, about the promise he had made to himself. He could explain that he had a particular hatred for men who abused their power, but instead he found himself simply saying, "Because it was the right thing to do." Sarah studied him for a long moment, and Cole had the uncomfortable feeling that she could see straight through to his soul. Finally, she held out her hand. "Thank you, Mr. Anders. I am Sarah Shepard." Her hand was small in his, but calloused from work, her grip firm. "Cole," he said. "Just Cole?" "Well, just Cole," Sarah said, and there was the faintest hint of a smile on her lips despite everything. "I owe you a debt I do not know how to repay." "No debt," Cole said, releasing her hand perhaps a moment later than necessary. "But I would like to help you figure out what is really going on here. Those men are not going to give up this easily. If that document is forged, and I am pretty sure it is, we need to prove it." Sarah's smile faded. "I do not understand why anyone would do this. My father's land is not particularly valuable. It is decent grazing land, but there are bigger, better ranches all around us. Why go to all this trouble?" "That is a good question," Cole agreed. "Mind if I come in? Maybe if we look at all your father's papers together, we can find some answers." Sarah hesitated only briefly before nodding and leading him inside. The house was small but well kept, with whitewashed walls and simple furniture that was clearly made to last rather than to impress. There was a stone fireplace against one wall, and a large table that served for both eating and working dominated the main room. Sarah set the lockbox on this table and pulled out a chair for Cole before sitting down herself. For the next 2 hours, they went through every document in the box. Cole learned that Tom Shepard had come to Del Rio 15 years ago, buying the land when Sarah was just a child. Her mother had died of fever when Sarah was 10, and it had been just father and daughter ever since. Tom had built the ranch slowly, carefully, always paying his debts on time. The loan he had taken out 4 years ago was to buy more cattle and to dig a deep well during a drought year. It had been a smart investment, and the ranch had prospered because of it. "Your father was a careful man," Cole observed, reading through the meticulously kept account books. "Every expense recorded, every sale documented. This is not a man who would sign a legal document without reading it thoroughly." "He was teaching me to be the same way," Sarah said softly. "He always said that in this country, your word and your paperwork were the only things that could not be taken from you by force. He taught me to read every contract, to keep copies of everything, to trust but verify." She laughed bitterly. "Looks like his careful ways still were not enough to protect us." "They protected you more than you know," Cole said. "If you did not have all these records, those men could have walked all over you. As it is, we have evidence that something is not right about their claim." Sarah looked at him with those green eyes that seemed to see too much. "You keep saying, 'we.' Why are you still here? Cole, you have done your good deed. Most men would have walked away by now." It was a fair question, and Cole was not entirely sure of the answer himself. He had drifted from town to town for 7 years, never staying anywhere long, never getting involved in other people's problems beyond what was necessary to earn his pay and move on. But something about Sarah Shepard and her fierce determination to hold on to her home had gotten under his skin. Or maybe it was the injustice of it all, the way those men had thought they could just steamroll over her because she was a woman alone. Or maybe, a small voice in the back of his mind suggested, it was the way his heart had kicked in his chest when she smiled, the way he found himself wanting to stand between her and every trouble in the world. "Because I know what it is like to lose everything," Cole finally said. "My family had a farm in Missouri. Good land, worked it for generations. When I was 18, the bank came calling with papers that said my father had signed over the deed as collateral for a loan he never took out. Turned out the bank manager and the local judge were in on it together, forging documents, stealing land, selling it to railroad companies. By the time anyone figured out what was happening, dozens of families had been ruined." "What happened?" Sarah asked softly. "Federal marshals finally investigated, and the men were arrested. But it was too late for most of us. The land had been sold, money changed hands. My parents died within a year of each other, broken by it all. I have been drifting ever since, doing ranch work mostly, trying to figure out what to do with myself." Cole looked down at the papers spread across the table. "When I saw those men on your porch today, I saw the same thing happening all over again, and I could not just walk away." Sarah reached across the table and placed her hand over his. It was a simple gesture, but it sent warmth spreading through Cole's chest. "I am sorry about your family," she said, "and I am grateful that you are here. But I do not want you to get hurt because of me. Those men are dangerous, and they clearly have powerful friends." "I have been in tight spots before," Cole said with a slight smile. "Besides, I meant what I said. Over my dead body are they taking your home?" The intensity in his voice made Sarah's breath catch. She withdrew her hand slowly, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "I should offer you dinner," she said, standing up perhaps a bit too quickly. "It is the least I can do. I assume you have not eaten?" "I would not want to impose," Cole started, but his stomach betrayed him with a loud rumble that made them both laugh. The tension of the day seemed to break, just a little. "That settles it," Sarah said, moving toward the kitchen area. "I am not much of a cook, but I can make a decent stew, and Rosa brought over fresh tortillas yesterday." Cole stood up to help, but Sarah waved him back down. "You have done enough for today. Sit, look through those papers some more. Maybe you will see something I missed." As Sarah worked at the stove, Cole found his attention drifting from the documents to watching her move around the small kitchen. She was efficient in her movements, practical, no wasted motion. She had changed from the calico dress into a simpler skirt and blouse, and her braid had come slightly loose, with small curls escaping to frame her face. Cole forced himself to look back down at the papers, feeling like he was intruding on something private just by watching her in her own home. But he could not stop his mind from wandering. Sarah Shepard was the kind of woman his mother would have called good people, the kind who worked hard and dealt fairly and stood by their word. She was also, Cole had to admit to himself, the most beautiful woman he had seen in a long time. Not just in features, though, those were certainly pleasing, but in the way she carried herself, the strength and dignity that radiated from her, even in her most vulnerable moment. "Find anything?" Sarah asked, setting a bowl of stew in front of him, along with a stack of warm tortillas. "Maybe," Cole said, pulling out one of the more recent documents. "This is a survey map of your property, dated 6 months ago. Did your father commission this?" Sarah leaned over his shoulder to look, and Cole caught the scent of lavender and sun-dried cotton. "No," she said slowly. "I have never seen that before. Why would someone survey our land?" "That is what I am wondering," Cole said, studying the map more closely. "And look here, someone has marked something in the northeast corner of your property. What is that area like?" "It is rough country, lots of rocks and scrub brush. Not good for much except running a few cattle through in the wet season." Sarah frowned. "My father used to joke that it was the most worthless part of our ranch." Cole felt the pieces starting to come together in his mind, though he could not quite see the full picture yet. "Would you be willing to ride out there with me tomorrow, before we meet with the sheriff? I would like to see what is so interesting about that corner of your land." Sarah met his eyes, and again Cole felt that jolt of connection, like a spark jumping between two wires. "Yes," she said. "I trust you, Cole Anders. I am not entirely sure why, but I do." They ate dinner in companionable silence, both tired from the emotional weight of the day. When Cole finally stood to leave, the sky outside had darkened to deep purple, and stars were beginning to appear over the distant hills. "I will be back at first light," Cole said from the doorway. "Make sure to lock up tight tonight. I do not think those men will try anything, but better safe than sorry." "I have my father's shotgun," Sarah said. "I know how to use it." "I do not doubt that for a second," Cole said with a grin. "Good night, Sarah." "Good night, Cole, and thank you for everything." Cole walked back to the boarding house where he had been staying, his mind churning through everything he had learned. The streets of Del Rio were quiet now, just the distant sound of a piano from the Lucky Star and the ever-present rush of the Rio Grande in the background. He had come to this town with no plans beyond earning enough money to drift on to the next place, but now he found himself caught up in something that mattered, something worth fighting for, or someone, that traitorous voice in his head whispered. He pushed the thought away, but not before acknowledging that there might be some truth to it. Sarah Shepard had gotten under his skin in the space of a single afternoon, and Cole was not sure what to do about that. Back at the boarding house, he cleaned his pistol and checked his ammunition, preparing for whatever tomorrow might bring. He had a feeling that things were going to get more complicated before they got simpler. The next morning dawned clear and hot, as most days did in Del Rio. Cole was at Sarah's door before the sun had fully cleared the horizon, leading 2 horses he had borrowed from the livery stable. Sarah came out already dressed for riding in practical split skirts and boots, her hair in that same practical braid, a wide-brimmed hat shading her face. "I brought provisions," she said, indicating saddlebags stuffed with food and water. "It is a 2-hour ride to the northeast corner." They rode out of town heading northeast, following the fence line that marked the boundary of the Shepard Ranch. The land here was typical South Texas country, rolling hills covered in mesquite and prickly pear, with occasional stands of live oak providing patches of shade. Cole found himself relaxing into the rhythm of the ride, enjoying the cool morning air before the heat of the day set in. "Tell me about your father," Cole said as they rode. "What kind of man was he?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was warm with memory. "He was a good man, fair, hard-working, honest to a fault. He came out here from Tennessee after my mother's family rejected her for marrying him. Said he wanted to build something that would last, something he could pass on to me." She smiled sadly. "He never remarried after Mama died. Threw all his energy into the ranch and into raising me. Taught me everything he knew about running cattle, managing land, dealing with buyers. Some of the other ranchers thought he was crazy, teaching a girl to do man's work, but he said he would rather have a capable daughter than an ignorant one." "Sounds like a wise man," Cole said. "He was, That is why I know he would never have signed that document those men showed us. He was too careful, too protective of what he had built. Something is wrong about all of this, Cole. I can feel it. They rode in silence for a while longer, climbing higher into the rougher country that marked the edge of the Shepherd property. The vegetation grew sparser here, and outcroppings of limestone broke through the thin soil. It was hard country, and Cole could see why Tom Shepherd had not bothered trying to make much use of it. There, Sarah said, pointing ahead. That is the northeast corner marker. You can just see the post through those trees. But as they approached, Cole noticed something that made him rein in his horse. Fresh wagon tracks and recent ones, cutting across the land toward a small canyon that split the rocky hillside. He gestured for Sarah to stop and dismounted, studying the tracks. Someone has been coming up here regularly, he said, within the last few days from the look of it. They followed the tracks on foot, leading their horses carefully over the rocky ground. The canyon narrowed, its walls rising 20 feet on either side, and then suddenly opened into a small hidden valley. What they saw there made them both stop in their tracks. A mining operation. Not a large one, but clear evidence of work, timber supports, piles of rock sorted by color and type, picks and shovels stacked near the entrance to a shaft that had been cut into the canyon wall. And most telling of all, a locked strongbox sitting on a makeshift table under a canvas shelter. What in God's name? Sarah breathed. This is my land. Who authorized mining here? Cole approached the shaft entrance carefully, peering into the darkness. The smell of wet rock and explosives drifted out. Someone is doing this secretly, he said, and I am willing to bet that forged document is connected. They want to force you off your land so they can claim whatever they are mining here. But mining for what? Sarah asked. This is cattle country, not mining country. Cole picked up a rock from one of the sorted piles, examining it in the sunlight. He was no expert, but he had spent time in Colorado mining camps, and he knew valuable ore when he saw it. The rock had a distinct reddish tint, with streaks of deep blue-green running through it. I think this might be copper, he said slowly. And if I am right, there could be a lot of it. Copper prices have been going up, especially with all the telegraph and electrical lines being run. A good copper deposit could be worth a fortune. Sarah took the rock from him, turning it over in her hands. Her face had gone pale. So they are trying to steal my land because there is copper under it? That would be my guess, and they are going to a lot of trouble to do it legally, or at least make it look legal. That way, even if you fight them, by the time it gets sorted out in court, they will have extracted everything of value and vanished. The sound of hoofbeats echoed off the canyon walls, and Cole instinctively moved to stand in front of Sarah, his hand dropping to the pistol at his hip. 4 men rode into the hidden valley, and Cole recognized 2 of them as the suited men from yesterday. The other 2 were rough-looking types, clearly hired muscle, with gun belts slung low on their hips. Well, well, said the first suited man, the one who seemed to be in charge. Miss Shepherd and her champion. I had hoped you would not be clever enough to figure this out. Mr. Garrett, Sarah said, her voice cold. I should have known you were behind this. You have been trying to buy this land from my father for years. So, now they had a name. Garrett looked entirely too pleased with himself as he dismounted, gesturing for his men to spread out. Your father was a stubborn fool, he said conversationally. If he had just sold when I first made my offer, none of this would have been necessary. But he refused, even when I increased the price. Said he would never sell the land that was going to be yours someday. Sentimental nonsense. So you decided to steal it instead, Cole said flatly. I prefer to think of it as acquiring an asset that was not being properly utilized, Garrett replied. And it would have worked perfectly if you had not stuck your nose in where it does not belong, Cowboy. Do you have any idea how much copper is in this hillside? Assayers estimate at least $200,000 worth, probably more. More than enough to make the effort of forging a few documents worthwhile. You will never get away with this, Sarah said. We know the truth now. We will tell the sheriff, the territorial governor if we have to. Garrett laughed, a cold sound that held no humor. And who will believe you? A grieving daughter desperate to keep her land, and a drifter with no reputation? I have the forged loan document. I have Judge Morrison in my pocket. By the time anyone investigates thoroughly, I will have extracted the copper and disappeared. You have no proof. We have this mining operation, Cole pointed out. Pretty hard to deny when it is sitting right here on our land. An illegal operation conducted by unknown parties, Garrett said smoothly. Nothing that connects it to me. I will simply claim I was trying to evict Miss Shepard for legitimate debt reasons, and anything else that happened here was done by claim jumpers. My hands are clean. Cole felt his anger rising, but he kept his voice level. So what now? You planning to shoot us? Because that will be a lot harder to explain away. Unfortunately, accidents happen all the time in rough country like this, Garrett said, and his hand moved toward his jacket. 2 riders going too fast, horses spooked, tragic fall into a canyon. Such a shame. Cole's pistol cleared leather before Garrett's hand reached his weapon, the metallic click of the hammer drawing back loud in the quiet valley. I would not, Cole said softly. Tell your boys to keep their hands where I can see them. The 2 hired guns had started to draw, but they froze at Cole's words and the rock-steady aim of his pistol. Cole might look like just another drifting cowboy, but there was something in his stance, in the way he held the gun, that spoke of experience and skill. You are outnumbered, Garrett said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. Maybe, Cole agreed, but I guarantee you will be the first one to die if this goes badly. And those 2 behind you, I have dealt with plenty of hired guns. They get paid to look tough, not to actually die for someone else's money. Question is, are you willing to gamble your life that they will stick around when the shooting starts? The moment stretched out, balanced on a knife's edge. Sarah had moved to Cole's side, and he saw from the corner of his eye that she had pulled a small pistol from somewhere in her clothing. Good for her. This is not over, Garrett finally said, raising his hand slowly. Even if you get out of here, I still have the legal claim. You have bought yourself a delay at best. We will see about that, Cole said. Now, you and your boys are going to mount up nice and slow and ride out of here. And if I see any of you within a mile of Miss Shepard or her property, I will assume you mean harm and act accordingly. We clear? Garrett's face was red with fury, but he nodded stiffly. Crystal clear, but you are making a big mistake, cowboy. You do not know who you are dealing with. I know exactly who I am dealing with, Cole replied. A thief and a coward who hides behind forged papers and hired guns. Now get out of here before I change my mind about letting you go. The 4 men mounted up and rode out of the canyon, though not without plenty of dark looks thrown back over their shoulders. Cole kept his pistol drawn until the sound of hoofbeats had faded completely, then finally allowed himself to breathe. That was either very brave or very foolish, Sarah said, her own pistol still clutched in her hand. Probably both, Cole admitted. But we needed to buy time and get information. Now we know for sure what this is about, and we have a witness to Garrett admitting the whole scheme. What witness? Sarah asked, confused. Cole grinned and gestured up toward the canyon rim. That one! Sarah followed his gaze and gasped. A figure was climbing down from a hidden vantage point on the rocks above, moving with the casual ease of someone who spent a lot of time in rough country. As the person got closer, Sarah could see it was a young Mexican man, probably no more than 25, wearing the practical clothing of a ranch hand. Santos! Sarah exclaimed. What are you doing here? Following you, senorita, the man said with a slight smile as he reached the valley floor. I saw you and Senor Anders ride out this morning, and I thought you might need help. I work for the ranch to the south, he explained to Cole. I have known Sarah since she was a little girl. When I saw those city men arrive yesterday, I got worried. Did you hear what Garrett said? Cole asked. Every word, Santos confirmed. And I am happy to swear to it in front of the sheriff, the judge, anyone who needs to hear it. Garrett is scum. He has been trying to run small ranchers off their land for years, but no one has ever been able to prove anything. Well, now we can, Sarah said, hope lighting her features for the first time since yesterday. Santos, thank you. Thank you so much. De nada, chiquita, Santos said warmly. Your father was a good man. He deserves better than to have his legacy stolen by men like Garrett. The 3 of them rode back to Del Rio together, pushing the horses harder than was probably wise, but needing to get back before Garrett could cause more trouble. By the time they reached town, it was nearly noon, and the heat was shimmering off the streets in waves. They went straight to the sheriff's office, where they found Sheriff Donovan just sitting down to his midday meal. Miss Shepard, Mr. Anders, the sheriff said, standing up when they entered. He was a solid man in his 50s, with iron gray hair and eyes that did not miss much. I was just about to come looking for you. Those gentlemen from Eagle Pass are claiming you threatened them yesterday. Good, Cole said, because we have quite a story to tell you, and Santos here is a witness to all of it. For the next hour, they laid out everything they had discovered: the forged document, the secret mining operation, Garrett's admission of the whole scheme. Sheriff Donovan listened carefully, taking notes, his expression growing darker as the story unfolded. "I knew something smelled wrong about this," he said finally. "Garrett has been circling around this territory like a vulture for years, but he is always just smart enough to stay on the right side of the law, or at least make it look that way." "Can you arrest him?" Sarah asked. "I can bring him in for questioning, certainly, and with Santos as a witness to his admission, we can probably make charges stick. But proving the forgery is going to be trickier. We will need an expert to examine that document, compare it to known samples of your father's signature." "I have letters my father wrote," Sarah said. "Dozens of them. He wrote to cattle buyers, other ranchers, suppliers, all with his signature." "That will help," Donovan said, "and I will send a telegram to the territorial marshal. This sounds like it might be bigger than just your property, Miss Shepard. If Garrett has been doing this to other people, we need to investigate thoroughly." A commotion outside the office made them all turn. Through the window, Cole could see a crowd gathering in the street, and in the center of it, Garrett and his men, along with the other two suited men from yesterday. "Looks like they are not waiting for us to come to them," Cole observed. Sheriff Donovan strapped on his gun belt and picked up his hat. "You all stay here," he said. "Let me handle this." But Cole followed him out onto the porch anyway, with Sarah and Santos close behind. The afternoon sun was brutal, and the tension in the air was thick enough to cut. Garrett stood in the middle of the street, looking entirely too confident for a man who had just been caught red-handed in a criminal conspiracy. "Sheriff Donovan," Garrett called out, "I am here to formally file charges against Cole Anders for assault and against Sarah Shepard for trespassing on property that legally belongs to the Eagle Pass Bank." "That is interesting," Donovan replied calmly, "because I was just about to bring you in for questioning regarding fraud, forgery, and attempted theft. Seems we have ourselves a situation." "I have done nothing illegal," Garrett said. "I have proper documentation for my claim to the Shepard property. What Mr. Anders and Miss Shepard have are baseless accusations from a disgruntled landowner and a drifter looking to play hero." "I also have a witness who heard you admit to forging documents and operating an illegal mining operation," Donovan said. "So why do not you and your boys come along peacefully, and we can sort this all out proper-like?" Garrett's expression hardened. "I am not going anywhere with you. Sheriff, you have no authority to arrest me on such flimsy evidence. I am a respected businessman with connections all the way to Austin. If you try to take me in, you will be lucky to keep your badge." "Threats now?" Donovan said. "That is not helping your case any." The crowd had grown larger, and Cole could feel the mood shifting. People were taking sides, some calling out support for Sarah, others seeming uncertain. Del Rio was a small town, and Garrett clearly had some influence here. Cole caught movement from the corner of his eye and saw two more of Garrett's men positioning themselves on either side of the street, hands near their weapons. "This is going to get ugly," Cole murmured to Sarah. "Stay behind me." "I am not hiding while you fight my battles," Sarah replied fiercely, but she did not move out from behind him either. "Garrett, last chance," Donovan said, his hand resting on his pistol. "Come peacefully or do not come at all, but if you draw on me, I will put you down." "I do not think so, Sheriff," Garrett said, and his hand moved toward his weapon. Everything happened at once. Garrett drew, but he was not fast, and Donovan was faster. The sheriff's bullet took Garrett in the shoulder, spinning him around. The two hired guns on the street drew their weapons, and Cole found himself pulling his pistol and firing in one smooth motion. He clipped one gunman in the leg, sending him sprawling. Santos had produced a rifle from somewhere and fired a warning shot that sent the other gunman diving for cover. The crowd scattered, screaming, running for safety. More shots rang out, and Cole saw one of Garrett's men firing from the roof of the general store. He grabbed Sarah and pulled her down behind a water trough as bullets kicked up dust where they had been standing. Sheriff Donovan had taken cover behind a post, returning fire methodically. "This is insane!" Sarah shouted over the noise. "People are going to get killed." "Not if I can help it," Cole replied. He leaned around the trough and fired 3 quick shots at the man on the roof, forcing him to duck back. "Santos, can you get around behind that building?" "See," Santos called back. "Cover me." Cole and the sheriff both opened fire, keeping the gunman pinned down while Santos sprinted across the street and disappeared into an alley. The firefight lasted less than 5 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. When the smoke cleared, 2 of Garrett's men were wounded but alive. One had run off entirely, and Garrett himself was sitting in the dust, clutching his bleeding shoulder and cursing. "Anyone else want to try their luck?" Sheriff Donovan called out, his pistol still drawn. "Because I am done being polite about this." The remaining suited men from yesterday raised their hands, clearly wanting no part of a shooting war. Santos emerged from the alley behind the general store, his rifle trained on the man who had been shooting from the roof, now climbing down with his hands up. "I think we are done here," Donovan said with satisfaction. He looked at Cole. "That was some fine shooting, Mr. Anders. You have done this before." "Once or twice," Cole admitted. His heart was still racing, adrenaline singing through his veins, but his hands were steady as he reloaded his pistol. He turned to Sarah, who was pale but composed. "Are you all right?" "I am fine," she said, though her voice shook slightly. "Is it over?" "This part is," Cole said. "But we still need to prove the forgery and make sure Garrett faces justice for everything he has done." The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Sheriff Donovan arrested Garrett and his remaining men on charges ranging from fraud to assault to attempted murder. A territorial marshal arrived from San Antonio to investigate, and Santos's testimony, combined with the evidence of the mining operation and the forged documents, painted a damning picture. An expert examined Tom Shepard's signature on the loan amendment and declared it a forgery within an hour, noting differences in pressure, pen angle, and ink composition. But the real break came when one of Garrett's suited associates, facing serious prison time, agreed to testify against his former boss. He revealed that Garrett had been running similar schemes across South Texas for years, working with a corrupt judge and several bank officials to create fraudulent debt claims and seize valuable properties. The forgery of Tom Shepard's signature was just one of dozens, and the mining operation on Sarah's land was far from the only illegal enterprise Garrett had been running. The whole criminal network began to unravel, and within a week, warrants were being issued for a dozen different people, including Judge Morrison, who was arrested before his stage could even return from San Antonio. The Eagle Pass Bank president was implicated as well, and federal authorities got involved to sort out the mess. Through it all, Cole stayed by Sarah's side. He helped her with the ranch work, riding fence, and checking on cattle. He was there when she gave her testimony to the marshal. He sat with her in the evenings on her porch as the sun set over the Rio Grande, talking about everything and nothing. And slowly, gradually, he felt something shifting between them, something deeper than gratitude or simple attraction. It was 10 days after the shootout when Sarah finally brought it up. They were sitting on her porch after a long day of work, watching the stars come out. Rosa had brought over dinner again, and they had eaten it in comfortable silence, both tired but content. "The marshal says I am definitely keeping the property," Sarah said quietly. "All the claims against it are void. I am in the clear." "That is wonderful," Cole said, and he meant it. But he also felt a small twist in his chest, because with the crisis resolved, there was no real reason for him to stay anymore. "Cole," Sarah said, turning to face him, "what are you going to do now?" It was the question he had been dreading. He could feel her eyes on him in the darkness, waiting for his answer. "I suppose I will move on," he said, trying to keep his voice light. "I have been in Del Rio longer than I usually stay anywhere. Time to see what is over the next horizon." "Is that what you really want?" Sarah asked, and there was something in her voice that made Cole's heart beat faster. He was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with himself. He had spent 7 years drifting, never putting down roots, never letting himself care too much about any place or any person. It was easier that way, safer. But sitting here with Sarah, watching the way the starlight caught in her hair, feeling the warmth of her presence beside him, Cole realized that somewhere along the way, he had stopped wanting easy and safe. "No," he said finally, honestly. "It is not what I want, but I do not know what else to do. I have been running for so long, I have forgotten how to stay." Sarah reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "Maybe it is time to remember," she said softly. "Cole, you saved my home, my livelihood, probably my life. But more than that, you stayed. Even when it was dangerous, even when you did not have to, you stayed. Do you know how rare that is? How special?" Sarah, Cole started, but she cut him off. Let me finish. I have been running this ranch alone since my father died, and I told myself I did not need anyone, that I could do it all myself, and maybe I could have, eventually. But these past few days with you here, working beside me, talking with me, just being present, it has made me realize how lonely I have been, how much I have been missing. What are you saying? Cole asked, hardly daring to hope. I am saying stay, Sarah said, squeezing his hand. Not because you owe me anything or because you feel obligated, but because you want to. Because maybe, just maybe, you could build something here, with me. Cole felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been locked away for years. I barely know you, he said, but it was a weak protest, and they both knew it. Then get to know me, Sarah said, and she smiled, that same fierce, determined smile she had worn when facing down Garrett and his men. I am not going anywhere. I will be right here, running my ranch, living my life. And if you want to be part of that life, if you want to see where this could go, then stay. Cole looked at their joined hands, then up at Sarah's face, seeing the hope and vulnerability in her expression. He thought about the past 7 years of drifting, of never belonging anywhere, never letting himself care. And he thought about the past 2 weeks, about the feeling of purpose he had found in defending Sarah's home, about the way his chest tightened every time she smiled, about how right it felt to sit beside her on this porch and watch the stars. I am not a rich man, he said slowly. I have about $50 to my name and a horse that is not even mine. I am just a cowboy who is good with his hands and decent with a gun. I do not have much to offer. You have yourself, Sarah said simply. That is enough, more than enough. Cole raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently, a gesture that made Sarah catch her breath. Then I am staying, he said. If you will have me, I am staying. The smile that broke across Sarah's face was like sunrise, bright and full of promise. She leaned forward and kissed him, soft and sweet and full of hope. Cole wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close, and for the first time in 7 years, he felt like he had finally come home. They sat together on the porch until the night grew late, talking about the future, about the ranch, about all the possibilities that stretched out before them. Sarah told him about her dreams of expanding the cattle operation, maybe buying the neighboring property if it ever came up for sale. Cole talked about some ideas he had for improving the water distribution on the land, techniques he had seen in Colorado that could help during drought years. It was Rosa who finally shooed them inside, emerging from her own house to call across the yard. It is late, and you both have work tomorrow. Go to bed, and Cole, you go to your own bed at the boarding house. There will be time for other arrangements after you two get properly married. They both laughed at that, but Cole did head back to the boarding house, his step lighter than it had been in years. He lay in his narrow bed that night, staring at the ceiling, hardly able to believe the turn his life had taken. 2 weeks ago, he had been just another drifter with no direction and no purpose. Now he had something worth staying for, someone worth fighting for. The next morning, Cole moved his few belongings out of the boarding house and into the small bunkhouse on Sarah's property. It was not much, just a single room with a bed and a stove, but it was close to the main house, close to Sarah, and that was all that mattered. He threw himself into ranch work with an energy and enthusiasm that surprised even him, fixing fences, mending the barn roof, helping Sarah sort cattle for market. The town of Del Rio buzzed with gossip about the scandal involving Garrett and his criminal network. The territorial marshal's investigation had uncovered fraud and theft on a massive scale, and it seemed like every day brought news of another arrest. Sarah's name was mentioned frequently, always with respect and sympathy, as the brave young woman who had stood up to corruption and won. Cole's name was mentioned too, usually as that cowboy who faced down Garrett's men, and he found himself the recipient of many approving nods and handshakes when he went into town. But the best part of each day was the evenings, when work was done, and he could sit with Sarah on her porch, talking and laughing and slowly, carefully, building something real between them. They talked about their pasts, their hopes, their fears. Sarah told him about growing up on the ranch, about learning to ride before she could barely walk, about the pain of losing her mother and then her father. Cole told her about Missouri, about the farm and the loss and the years of drifting, searching for something he could not name. You found it, though, Sarah said one evening, about a month after that first kiss. What you were looking for. Did I? Cole asked, though he knew the answer. You found a place to belong? Sarah said softly. You found me. Cole pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his chest. Yeah, he said. I guess I did. It was Rosa who brought up marriage first, in her direct way that brooked no argument. She cornered Cole one morning, while he was repairing a gate near her property. So when are you going to marry that girl? She demanded, hands on her hips. You have been living on her property for 2 months now, and people are starting to talk. We are taking things slow, Cole protested, though the truth was he had been thinking about marriage more and more lately. I want to make sure I can provide for her properly. Provide for her? Rosa snorted. Boy, she has been providing for herself just fine. What she needs is a partner, someone to share the load with, someone to build a life with. And unless I am very much mistaken, that someone is you. Cole could not help but smile. You are not wrong, Rosa. I love her. I think I have loved her since the moment I saw her standing up to those men, refusing to be pushed around. Then what are you waiting for? Rosa demanded. Ask her. The girl is crazy about you. Anyone with eyes can see it. Stop dancing around it and make it official. It is not that simple, Cole said. I have nothing to offer her. No land, no money, no family to speak of. You have love, Rosa said firmly, and you have loyalty and courage and a good heart. That is worth more than all the land and money in Texas. Now stop being foolish and ask that girl to marry you before someone else does. Cole laughed at the image of someone else trying to court Sarah. All right, I will ask her. But I want to do it right when the time is perfect. The perfect moment came a week later, on a warm October evening. The heat of summer had finally broken, and the air was sweet with the promise of cooler weather to come. Cole had spent the day helping Sarah drive a small herd of cattle to market, and they had done well, getting a good price that would keep the ranch solvent through the winter. They rode back to the ranch in high spirits, the setting sun painting the western sky in shades of orange and gold. I could not have done that without you, Sarah said as they unsaddled their horses. Managing those buyers, negotiating the price. You have a real head for business, Cole. I learned from the best, Cole said with a grin. You are the one who taught me everything about this ranch. We make a good team, Sarah said, and there was something in her eyes that made Cole's heart skip. Yeah, he agreed. We do. Later, after they had cleaned up and eaten dinner, they walked down to the edge of the property where a small creek ran through a stand of cottonwood trees. It was Sarah's favorite spot, she had told him once, the place where she came to think when the world got too heavy. The moon was rising, nearly full, and its light turned the water to silver. Sarah, Cole said, his voice suddenly tight with nervousness. Can I ask you something? Of course, she said, turning to face him. You can ask me anything? Cole took both her hands in his, feeling the familiar calluses, the strength in her fingers. These past few months with you have been the best of my life, he said. Every morning I wake up grateful that I am here, that I get to work beside you, laugh with you, build something meaningful with you. You have given me a home and a purpose and something I never thought I would find again. Cole, Sarah breathed, and he could see tears beginning to shine in her eyes. I do not have a fancy ring or much money, Cole continued. I do not come from a good family or have any prospects beyond what I can earn with my own 2 hands. But I love you, Sarah Shepherd. I love you with everything I am. And if you will have me, if you will take a chance on a reformed drifter with nothing to his name but his word and his heart, I would be honored to be your husband. For a moment, Sarah just stared at him, and Cole felt his heart hammering in his chest, terrified that he had misread everything, that he had moved too fast. But then she was laughing and crying at the same time, throwing her arms around his neck and kissing him with such fierce joy that he nearly fell over. Yes, she said against his lips. Yes, 1,000 times. Yes, oh Cole, I love you too. I have been waiting for you to ask, hoping you would, dreaming about it. Cole lifted her off her feet, spinning her around, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, he kissed her properly, deeply, pouring all his love and hope and gratitude into that single moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Sarah was smiling so wide her face must have hurt. We should get married soon, she said. I do not want to wait. Is that terrible? Is that too forward? That is perfect, Cole said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I do not want to wait either. I have spent 7 years of my life drifting and waiting. I am done waiting." They were married 3 weeks later, on a bright November morning in the small church in Del Rio. Rosa and her husband Miguel stood as witnesses, along with Santos and Sheriff Donovan. Sarah wore a simple white dress that had belonged to her mother, and Cole wore new clothes purchased with some of the money from the cattle sale, the first new clothes he had owned in years. The ceremony was short and sweet, the words simple but meaningful. Cole slipped a plain gold band on Sarah's finger, one he had purchased from the jeweler in town using nearly all his savings. It was not fancy, but it was real and solid, a symbol of the commitment he was making. Sarah had gotten him a matching band, and when she placed it on his finger, Cole felt something settle deep in his soul, a sense of rightness and belonging that he had not felt since before his parents died. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the preacher said with a smile. "Cole, you may kiss your bride." Cole did, to the cheers and applause of the small gathering. When they walked out of the church into the November sunshine, Sarah's hand in his, Cole felt like the luckiest man in all of Texas. The town had put together a small celebration at the Lucky Star Saloon, cleared out and decorated for the occasion. There was food and music and dancing, and for a few hours, Cole and Sarah were surrounded by well-wishers and friends, people who had come to respect Sarah's determination and Cole's loyalty. Even gruff Sheriff Donovan gave a toast, raising his glass to the two most stubborn people in Del Rio, who somehow found each other and made it work. But eventually, the celebration wound down, and Cole and Sarah made their way back to the ranch, to the home they would now officially share. Cole had spent the past week fixing up the main house, repairing loose floorboards and patching the roof, making sure everything was in good order. It was not much, but it was theirs, and that made it perfect. That first night as husband and wife was sweet and tender, full of whispered promises and gentle discoveries. Cole held Sarah close, overwhelmed by the trust she showed in him, the gift of her love and her body and her future. He vowed silently to spend every day of his life proving himself worthy of that trust, of being the man she believed he could be. The winter that followed was hard work, but happy. They fell into a rhythm, working the ranch together during the day and spending their evenings planning for the future. Cole proved to have a knack for breeding decisions, able to spot good bloodlines and predict which cattle would produce the best calves. Sarah was brilliant with the business side, negotiating deals and managing their finances with a skill that would have made her father proud. By spring, the ranch was thriving. They bought 24 more head of cattle and leased an additional 100 acres of grazing land from a neighbor who was getting too old to work it himself. The extra land gave them room to expand, and the cattle sale that summer brought in enough profit to finally pay off the last of the original loan free and clear. "We are debt-free," Sarah said, staring at the paid in full notice from the Eagle Pass Bank's new management. "For the first time since my father took out that loan, we owe nothing to anyone." "Your father would be proud," Cole said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Look at what you have built here, what you have preserved. His legacy is secure." "Our legacy," Sarah corrected, leaning back against him. "This is ours now, Cole, yours and mine together." It was that same summer when Sarah came to Cole with news that made his heart soar. They were sitting on the porch in the cool of the evening, watching fireflies dance over the creek, when she took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "We are going to have a baby," she said softly. "I am sure of it. Rosa confirmed it this morning." Cole felt tears spring to his eyes, and he did not bother to hide them. "Sarah," he breathed. "Truly?" "Truly," she said, smiling through her own tears. "In about 6 months, we are going to be parents." Cole pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as if she might break, though he knew from experience that Sarah Shepard Anders was about as breakable as tempered steel. "I love you," he said against her hair. "I love you so much. Thank you for giving me this, for giving me everything I never knew I needed." "We gave it to each other," Sarah said. "This life, this love, this future, we built it together." The pregnancy was not easy. Sarah was sick most mornings for the first few months, and as summer turned to fall, she grew increasingly uncomfortable in the heat. But she never complained, never let it slow her down more than absolutely necessary. Cole tried to take on more of the physical work, but Sarah insisted on doing her share, stubborn and independent as always. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she would say whenever Cole tried to fuss over her. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time. I will be fine." And she was fine. More than fine. As her belly grew round with their child, Sarah seemed to glow with health and happiness. Cole found himself constantly amazed by her strength, her grace, the way she took everything in stride. He was also terrified, haunted by memories of his own mother dying in childbirth, with what would have been his younger sibling. He could not lose Sarah, not now, not when he had finally found happiness. Rosa seemed to sense his fear, and took him aside one day in late January, about a month before the baby was due. "That girl is strong as an ox," she said bluntly. "She will be fine, and so will the baby. But she needs you to be strong too, Cole. She needs you to believe in her." "I do believe in her," Cole said. "I just cannot help worrying." "Worry is normal," Rosa said more gently. "But do not let it consume you. Trust in Sarah, trust in God, and trust that everything will work out as it should." Cole tried to take Rosa's advice to heart, but as February approached and Sarah grew heavier and more tired, his anxiety only increased. He found himself unable to sleep, lying awake listening to Sarah breathe, terrified that something would go wrong. But when the time came, in the early hours of a cold February morning, Sarah was magnificent. Her labor was long and difficult, lasting nearly 18 hours, but she never cried out, never lost her courage. Rosa and the town's midwife were there to help, and Cole held Sarah's hand through it all, wiping her forehead with cool cloths and whispering encouragement. When their son finally arrived, red-faced and squalling with indignation at being thrust into the world, Cole wept openly. He had a son, a healthy, beautiful son, with dark hair and his mother's green eyes. "What should we name him?" Sarah asked, exhausted but radiant as she held their baby for the first time. Cole thought of his own father, dead these 7 years, a good man who had lost everything through no fault of his own. "Thomas," he said softly. "After your father, Tom Anders?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Yes," she whispered. "Perfect. Hello, Thomas. Welcome to the world, little one." The years that followed were full and rich and happy. Young Tom grew into a sturdy boy with his mother's determination and his father's quiet strength. 2 years after Tom was born, they welcomed a daughter, Emma, who had Sarah's auburn hair and Cole's creekwater eyes, and 3 years after that, another son, James, who seemed determined from birth to do everything his own way. The ranch prospered under their joint management. They expanded gradually, carefully, never overextending themselves, building something sustainable and solid. Cole proved to have a gift for training horses, and they started a small breeding operation that brought in additional income. Sarah took over the books entirely, managing their finances with such skill that other ranchers started asking her advice. They became respected members of the Del Rio community, known for their fair dealing and their willingness to help neighbors in need. When a drought hit the region in 1889, Cole and Sarah organized a cooperative water sharing agreement among local ranchers that kept everyone's herds alive. When a fever swept through town in 1891, Sarah turned their barn into a makeshift hospital and nursed sick families back to health, alongside Rosa and the town doctor. The children grew up strong and capable, learning to ride and rope and manage cattle alongside their parents. Cole made sure each of them could read and write and figure numbers, knowing that education would open doors that physical strength alone could not. Sarah taught them about honor and fairness and standing up for what was right, lessons she had learned from her own father. On warm summer evenings, the family would gather on the porch that Cole had expanded and improved over the years. He would tell the children stories about the old days, about how he had first met their mother, about the day he had faced down the bad men trying to steal their home. The children never tired of hearing how their father had said, "Over my dead body you will," and meant it with every fiber of his being. "You were very brave, Papa," little Emma would say, her eyes wide with admiration. "Your mother was the brave one," Cole would always reply, pulling Sarah close. "I just did what any man would do when the woman he loves is in trouble." "Any good man," Sarah would correct with a smile, kissing his cheek. As the years passed and the new century approached, Cole sometimes thought back to that August day in 1882, when he had seen 3 strangers step off the stage in Del Rio. He had been 25 years old, directionless and alone, with nothing to his name but a borrowed horse and $50. Now, at 43, he had a wife he adored, 3 healthy children, a prosperous ranch, and a place in the community. He had gone from being a drifter with no past and no future to being a man with roots that went deep into the Texas soil. "Do you ever regret it?" Sarah asked him one night as they sat together on the porch, watching the sunset. The children were grown now, Tom at 19 helping to manage the ranch, Emma at 17 preparing to go to San Antonio to study at a teacher's college, and James at 14 still deciding what he wanted to do with his life. Staying here, I mean, tying yourself down when you had always been free to drift. Cole turned to look at his wife, her auburn hair now streaked with gray, her face lined with the marks of a life well lived. She was as beautiful to him now as she had been that first day, maybe more so because he knew every inch of her, inside and out. He knew her strength and her vulnerabilities, her dreams and her fears, the way she took her coffee, and the sound of her laugh in the morning. "Not for a single moment," he said, taking her hand. "You gave me a home, Sarah. Not just this ranch, but a real home in here." He placed his free hand over his heart. "You gave me a reason to stay, a purpose, a family. You gave me a life worth living. How could I ever regret that?" Sarah's eyes shimmered with tears, even after all these years still moved by his words. "You saved me too, you know," she said softly. "Not just from Garrett and his schemes, but from a life alone, from thinking I had to be strong enough to do everything by myself. You showed me that asking for help is not weakness, that sharing the burden makes it lighter. You taught me what real partnership looks like." Cole kissed her then, a kiss that held 18 years of love and trust and shared history. When they broke apart, both smiling, he kept her hand in his, their fingers intertwined as naturally as breathing. "Come on," he said, standing and pulling her to her feet. "Let us go check on the horses one more time before bed. I want to make sure that new mare is settling in all right." "You just want an excuse to walk in the moonlight," Sarah teased, but she came along willingly, as she always did. They walked hand in hand down to the barn, their steps synchronized after so many years together. The night was cool and clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. From the barn, they could hear the soft sounds of horses shifting in their stalls, the occasional whinny or stamp of hooves. Cole opened the barn door, and they stepped inside, breathing in the familiar scent of hay and horse and leather. The new mare, a beautiful chestnut with a white blaze, looked up at their entrance and nickered softly. "She is settling in well," Sarah observed, running a gentle hand along the mare's neck. "I think she will produce some fine foals for us." "I think you are right," Cole agreed. He moved to stand behind Sarah, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "This is a good life we have built." "The best life," Sarah said, leaning back against him. And it all started because a drifter with nothing to his name decided to stand up for a woman he did not even know. "Best decision I ever made," Cole said quietly. They stood there in the barn for a long time, comfortable in the silence, each lost in their own memories and grateful for the path that had brought them together. When they finally walked back to the house, arms around each other's waists, the moon was high overhead, bathing everything in silver light. Inside, they checked on James, the only child still living at home, finding him asleep with a book on his chest. Cole carefully removed the book and pulled the blanket up over his youngest son, feeling a rush of love and protectiveness so strong it nearly staggered him. In their own bedroom, Cole and Sarah prepared for sleep with the easy rhythm of long habit. As they lay in bed, Sarah's head on Cole's shoulder, his arm around her, Cole felt the deep contentment of a man who had found his place in the world. "Thank you," he whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Sarah murmured sleepily. "For everything," Cole said. "For trusting me that first day, for loving me, for building this life with me, for giving me a home." Sarah lifted her head to kiss him softly. "Thank you for staying," she whispered back, "for keeping your promise, for being the man I always knew you could be." They drifted off to sleep, wrapped in each other's arms, the way they had every night for 18 years. Outside, the Texas wind whispered through the cottonwood trees, carrying with it the scent of home and the promise of tomorrow. The story of how Cole Anders had faced down corrupt men trying to steal Sarah Shepard's ranch became legend in Del Rio, told and retold until it took on almost mythical proportions. But the real story, the one that mattered most, was quieter and more profound. It was the story of two people who found each other at the right moment, who chose to build something lasting in a world that was often harsh and unforgiving. It was the story of love and loyalty, of standing firm when it mattered most, of making a home not just in a place but in each other's hearts. And as Cole and Sarah grew old together on their ranch, surrounded by children and eventually grandchildren, they never forgot that first day, when a drifting cowboy had looked at an injustice and said with absolute conviction, "Over my dead body you will." Those words had changed everything, setting in motion events that would shape the rest of their lives. But in the end, it was not the dramatic confrontation or the courage under fire that mattered most. It was the choice to stay, to build, to love, to create something that would outlast them both. Years later, when Tom took over the ranch with his younger brother James as partner, he would stand on that same porch where his parents had courted and fallen in love, and he would understand what his father had tried to teach him all those years. Home was not just land or buildings or even blood family. Home was the place where you chose to make your stand, the people you chose to stand with, the life you built with your own hands and heart. And when Tom's own children asked him to tell them about their grandfather, about the legendary cowboy who had saved their grandmother's ranch, Tom would smile and say, "He was not a legend. He was just a good man who loved my mother and did the right thing when it mattered. But that is the best kind of person to be." Cole lived to see his grandchildren grow, to watch the ranch continue to prosper under the next generation's care. He lived to see the turn of the century, to witness automobiles beginning to appear on the streets of Del Rio, to see the world changing in ways he could never have imagined as a young man. But through all those changes, one thing remained constant: his love for Sarah and hers for him. Even as their bodies grew frail and their steps slowed, that bond never weakened. They had built something rare and precious, a partnership based on mutual respect and deep affection, and it sustained them through everything life threw their way. When Cole finally passed in the winter of 1915, at the age of 58, it was peacefully in his sleep, with Sarah holding his hand. He had lived a good life, full of purpose and meaning, surrounded by the family he and Sarah had created together. His last words, whispered to his wife of 33 years, were simple but profound. "Thank you for letting me stay." Sarah lived another 7 years, continuing to manage the ranch with help from her sons, until her own death in 1922. She was buried next to Cole in the small cemetery outside Del Rio, under a cottonwood tree not far from the creek, where he had proposed all those years ago. Their headstones were simple, just their names and dates, but the love they shared and the legacy they left behind spoke louder than any grand monument ever could. The ranch stayed in the Anders family for generations, passed down from parent to child, each new generation adding their own improvements while honoring the foundation that Cole and Sarah had built. And on warm summer evenings, when the family gathered on that expanded porch, someone would inevitably tell the story of how it all began. Of the day a drifting cowboy saw an injustice and decided to make his stand. It was a story worth telling, a reminder that one person's choice to do the right thing, to stand up for someone in need, could change everything. It was a story about courage and love, about building a home not just in a place but in another person's heart. It was the story of Cole and Sarah, the drifter and the rancher's daughter, who found each other in the dusty heat of a Texas summer and built something that would last forever. And though the world continued to change, though the Old West became just a memory and Del Rio grew from a small border town into something larger and more complex, the essence of their story remained true. Love was still worth fighting for. Home was still worth defending. And sometimes the most important words a person could say were simply, "Over my dead body you will." Those words had started everything, but what came after was what truly mattered: the life built day by day, the love nurtured through good times and hard times, the family raised with values that would outlast any individual lifetime. Cole and Sarah's story was not just about a dramatic moment of confrontation, though that moment was important. It was about everything that followed, about the choice to stay and build and love with everything they had. And in the end, that was the greatest legacy they could leave behind. Proof that even in a hard land during a hard time, love could triumph, home could be defended, and two people who found each other against all odds could build something beautiful and lasting that would echo down through the generations. The story of Cole and Sarah Anders, of the cowboy who stood firm and the woman worth standing for, became more than just family history. It became part of the fabric of Del Rio itself, a reminder of the values that had built the town and the people who had made it great. And though they were long gone, their love story lived on, inspiring others to take their own stands, to fight for what mattered, to build homes not just of wood and stone, but of love and loyalty and unshakable commitment. That was the true story, the one that mattered most. Not just the day Cole Anders said, "Over my dead body you will," though that day was important, but all the days that came after, all the mornings waking up beside the person you love, all the evenings watching the sunset together, all the challenges faced side by side, all the joys shared and sorrows comforted. That was the real story, the one worth telling and retelling for as long as anyone remained to remember. And so, the tale of Cole and Sarah lived on, a testament to the power of love, the importance of standing firm, and the beauty of a life well lived in partnership with your truest companion. It was a story that began with confrontation and courage, but blossomed into something far greater, a love that lasted a lifetime and a legacy that would never fade.